So Todd Gurley is coming back to Georgia to play for the Atlanta Falcons, a one-year deal so far that can be reported. I don't know about the money exactly. Dean Legge, Matt DeBary, Matt, you're a big Falcons fan, and we've talked about that a lot. And I've encouraged you to get rid of that fandom, but you won't do it to yourself. So here comes Todd Gurley. A lot of Georgia fans are going to be very excited about this.
Yeah, love the Falcons. 1 year, $5 million, not really a risk at all. I mean, a 1 year, $5 million deal in the NFL is nothing. So, 25 years old, we've seen what he can do, 70 career touchdowns in the NFL. We saw what he did at Georgia. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But if you're the Falcons, it's a nice little move. They've got Ito Smith back there, who's a young back who had some success last year. But the Falcons are not going to be good next year, and they've got a strong rebuild ahead of them. But as it relates to Todd, I think it was something the Falcons needed. I think something Todd needed. And while his best days may be behind him in the NFL, I think that need's not getting any better. We'll see. I hope he has one more really good year in him, and he can help my birds out. But I remember when he was a recruit, Dean. He was a big time prospect, but the general consensus was that Keith Marshall was the higher rated back and could do more for you. But I mean, that Buffalo game, he touches the ball for the first time in Athens, takes it 100 yards. I think it was his first touch. Mm-hmm. And right then, I think you knew you had something, or Georgia fans had something really special in Todd Gurley.
Well, I can talk about Todd pre-NFL quite a bit because I saw a lot of it. Going into his commitment that was coming down to Clemson and Georgia, Alabama had kind of, floated away. They weren't really, Todd really wasn't interested in them. So it really came down to Clemson and Georgia, and he picked Georgia. And soon thereafter, it became evident as soon as he got on campus just how good he was. But I want to take people back to the time. Really, recruiting has changed dramatically. I mean, Todd got to Georgia in the summer of 2012. Before that time, you're talking about the 2011 and 2010 football seasons. In 2010, Todd played running back, but he was primarily a defensive back. He was mainly a safety, stuff like that. He played a lot of that, at least. Primarily might be the wrong word. His senior season, he really took Tarboro on his back and won them the state championship. The problem was, those of us in the recruiting industry, there wasn't a lot of information about Todd. And two, when you take a look at the type of running back that had really performed over time, they weren't like Todd Gurley, and they weren't like Derrick Henry. So these bigger backs really became a big deal in the SEC. I remember a couple of things about Todd from when he was coming up, before anyone knew who he was. I remember talking to Brian McClendon, who was the guy that recruited and signed both him and Keith Marshall the season after Isaiah Crowell. And all I heard about for the first few weeks in August was how good Todd Gurley was. And Keith Marshall too, but that Todd was sort of surprising people. And Brian said, well, we thought he was pretty good. We don't know, we didn't know, but we thought he was pretty good. And right now he does look pretty good. Well, needless to say, the Buffalo game was just one step into the next direction of what he would be. I'm trying to remember where he really exploded onto the scene. I don't really know that there was ever a moment that he exploded onto the scene, Matt. But slowly over time, I mean, certainly that kickoff return against Buffalo showed you just how quick he could do things. But the next week they were at Missouri, and that was Jarvis Jones' really total breakout for that year. And, Todd and them offensively had to score a bunch of points to get past a defense that was struggling without some starters because of some suspension. But Todd, by the Florida game, was becoming a weapon that other teams really feared. And by then, the legit defenses in the SEC, Alabama, Florida, whoever else, they were having a hard time stopping him. And with the exception of the South Carolina game in Columbia, where just nothing went right for Georgia, Todd was coming on strong in 2012, Alabama was very concerned about him in that championship game, and they proved to be correct. If Georgia had had one more back that was maybe Isaiah Crowell or more, they probably would have won that game. They basically went with Todd that entire game, and he almost got him there.
I think Todd Gurley could have made an NFL roster and made an impact on an NFL team in that 2012 season. It's hard. I mean, rarely will you find a guy, it's rarer than rare, who could skip college and go from high school to the NFL. I think Todd Gurley could have made an impact on an NFL roster the 2012 season, which was his freshman year at Georgia. He was just that good. And again, that Buffalo game was like 100 degrees out.
Yes.
He takes it 100 yards. He scores, I think, 2 more touchdowns on the ground. I mean, he looked like the best player on the field. And you're like, wow, this kid's, just a freshman. And I mean, that whole freshman season, I feel like his freshman season, he was better than 2013. 2014, he could have won the Heisman if he didn't, if he didn't get suspended halfway through the year when he was probably the Heisman favorite, and then the ACL afterwards. But I mean, that 2012 season, it was hard to find a better running back than Todd Gurley. So, I mean, you said in his prime, how good he could have been. Yeah,
I don't think. I mean, not that long ago, Matt Dillon and I did a discussion about who the best running backs all time were at Georgia, and at Georgia, it's hard to put Todd in the top 5 because of what the other people accomplished at Georgia. But if I'm starting from scratch and I get them for 3 full years, no injuries or anything, I probably take Todd he's going either number 1 or number 2, period. And the question is he go over Herschel Walker? Now, a lot of old timers or people who are sort of maybe not as much football people, they would say that's ridiculous, etc. But Todd Gurley is not getting tackled by defensive linemen that weigh what I weigh. He's getting tackled by 300-pounders and 325-pounders in the middle. Herschel Walker was something really we've never seen before in 1980. If you were to take Herschel and put him in this era, he would still win the Heisman Trophy. What would happen if you took Todd Gurley and put him in 1980? Okay, he's
still faster than everyone, and he's still big and strong, so he's going to get those power yards. But I know Clemson couldn't stop him.
Well,
Gurley,
I mean,
Clemson was the best player in the country that week. I mean, no one was touching that guy. He was unreal.
Let's talk about the 2012 season. I'm just going to roll through statistics and get to the Clemson game in 14. But, he only ran the ball 28 times in the first 3 games, and that was for over 270 yards rushing. So they really didn't use him a lot at the beginning of the season. But then this is 2012, 24 carries for 130 yards and 3 touchdowns against Tennessee. Against the Gators, 27 touches, 27 rushes, 118 yards, and a touchdown. Against Auburn, 11 rushes, 116, 18 rushes, 117 against Mississippi. Against Alabama, this was really the game where he, I think distanced himself and made him show what he really was. 12 touches, 23 touches, 23 runs, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. The next regular season game they play, this guy only has 12 carries against Clemson for 154 yards. There is no way they lose that game if he doesn't miss half that game. There's just no way. Okay?
Right.
And Clemson fans, be triggered all you want to, but you know it's true.
He only played 3 quarters of the Clemson game. I don't even know
if he played 3 quarters. I mean, if you just consolidate it, I don't know when he came back in the 3rd, but he missed after that touchdown run. After he got hurt, excuse me. Georgia was dealing in that game. The team that should have won the game. But you're dealing without Malcolm Mitchell and Todd Gurley in that game. Come on. So
yeah, well, I forgot you were talking about 2013 there. I know 2014.
No, let me get to
2013.
2013.
He was really good. Yeah.
2013 against South Carolina. That was a really good South Carolina team and defense. So Todd goes for 30 carries, 132 yards, 20 carries, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown against Georgia Tech that day. 20 touches, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Gators in 2013, including a 73-yard pass reception from Aaron Murray. And then, of course, he only played in 6 games in 2014. It was really shameful what he did to Clemson, which was 15 carries, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns, just rushing the ball. Not
Right.
even with the special teams stuff.
100-yard kick return touchdown. And his last touch of the game was like a 50-yard touchdown, either the very
yards.
beginning of the fourth quarter. And then they took him out. Then Nick Chubb came in, started running all over him. So if he would have played that whole game, he easily goes over, 200 rushing yards, 300 total. But
look at all 6 games he played in 2014 before the suspension and then the injury.
Well, he had the longest pass of the season, right, against Vanderbilt. I think that was his last game before the suspension. A little lollipop he threw up in the air. But
yeah, I mean, 15 carries, 198 yards against Clemson. Against South Carolina, 20 carries, 131 yards. Troy, only 6 carries, 73 yards. Tennessee, they needed him bad in this game. 28 attempts, 208 yards. Vanderbilt, 25 attempts, 163 yards. Of course, that pass, I'm leaving out the receptions and passes and special team stuff. Against Auburn, 29 attempts, 138 yards. Probably one too many attempts. He's the best.
Well, that Auburn game was so important too. That was one of the big games. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I want to pause for emphasis. He's the best college football player I've seen play live. Okay, and I've seen a lot of really good college football. I've seen Jadeveon Clowney play. I've seen. I don't think I need to go down the list of all the superb. Derek, Jadeveon Clowney. Who else? Baker Mayfield was really good. There have been a slew of really good players through the years that I've witnessed. But in terms of straight freaks that you don't know and you better be ready with the camera, Todd takes the cake. And I would say it's not close. Some of those other guys have done amazing things too. Hines Ward was an amazing football player. Herschel Walker was amazing. But the things that Todd could do, Herschel wasn't doing them. Herschel wasn't. I don't remember Herschel hurdling people. I remember him jumping over piles. Todd did that too.
Well, that was the thing I was going to say. Todd has the highlights. He's jumping over Kentucky defenders from 8 yards out. Jumped over the Georgia Tech player on the reception. He caught the ball really well. He was such a weapon. And I think there's not a whole lot more to say, but he was a freak, and I think that
I have a lot to say.
An all-time Sanford Stadium moment.
I have a lot to say.
Well, I was just trying to think of instances and different highlights, but the 2013 game against Tech where he just put the team on his back in overtime, it doesn't mean a whole lot now because Georgia whoops Tech by 40 points now, but that was a huge game where Georgia was down.
That moment was, Georgia already had the lead against Kentucky when Hudson came in that game when Aaron got hurt in 2013. That was a broken season and a broken team, just decimated by injuries. The one person they had on that team was Todd, and he was not going to let them lose to Georgia Tech, and he didn't. They got down 20-0 in that game. And I because of what I do as a photographer, I often hear many things that the players say, and of course I don't report on them because that's their thing. But he was ready to play against Clemson in 2014. I don't know what Clemson did to him. I don't know if that was just about that injury or if it was because where he lives or what. But this guy doesn't talk a lot. Really, he likes to talk, I think, but he was a relatively reserved person in front of the media. He likes the attention, but he is reserved. It's kind of a strange combination. But he was completely ready to play against Clemson in 2014. And had I known what I knew 30 minutes before kickoff, when he said what he said to the team, I would have said there's no way they're losing this game because he's not going to let them lose this game. And you saw him do that more than once. I mean, it wasn't just that game. When you think about the Tech game in 2013, you think about, to some degree, the Florida game in 2013,
Mm-hmm.
Matt. There were so many moments with Todd where, you know, he could just do it all. I hate to see what's happened to him in the NFL. I don't think the Rams have used him correctly, and I'm glad he got paid a lot. I hope the Falcons will appropriately use him. We'll see. But if his career is what it is, then I mean, I'm just telling you, the guy is as damn good as I've ever seen play. I'm not saying there won't be somebody better, and I'm not saying Herschel Walker, for what Georgia celebrates, shouldn't be higher on a pedestal, because he should. I'm just saying raw athleticism. You know, this guy. I don't know.
You talk about checking all the boxes at running back: size, speed, power, acceleration. I mean, he could still juke you. He could jump over you. He could run through you. He could run by you. He really was a special player, and I think people today still look at him as, you know, having a really good NFL career. Everyone knows about the knee and what's happened there, but when he was healthy, I think he came up like second in the MVP race. In season number 2. He's done really well for the Rams. And again, 25 years old, he's probably still has a little bit of gas in the tank, but it's going to be all up to that knee. If the knee is fine, I do think he could have a nice little season for the Falcons, but I'm not expecting 1,000 yards or anything like that, but maybe some tough runs, especially around the goal line. And he's going to get butts in the seats. I know that. It's not a great time to be a Falcons fan right now. And
no.
They don't really pick a lot of Georgia players. They love Florida and LSU players, and most of them have panned out. But there's going to be a lot of excited Georgia fans that want to see him back in Atlanta, and it's a good deal for everyone.
I think he's one of the most exceptional athletes I've ever seen. I mean, John Isner was a top 10 player in the world in tennis, and to be on the court, seeing what he can do with a serve was pretty amazing. Anthony Edwards is probably going to go number 1 overall in the NBA draft. Anthony Edwards is, pretty shocking with what some of the things he can do with just, but Todd would do things in ways that, again, if you're a photographer or just a consumer of football, you'd better be ready to consume or take photos, because he's going to do something amazing.
He was a top 10 pick after tearing his knee up. He had just had surgery, and he was still a top 10 pick. Usually that might move guys out of the first round. I mean, if he was healthy after that 2014 season, wins the Heisman, he could have been a top 5 pick in a day and age where you don't want to take running backs that early in the draft. And they got a steal at number 10 in Todd Gurley, I thought.
I mean, when you look at a couple things, when you look at the NFL before they took Todd, they just didn't take running backs in the first round. Now they've taken Ezekiel Elliott since, and Saquon Barkley, but it's not exactly a lot of them. He started this trend back, but he certainly would have won the Heisman Trophy in 2014. I'm trying to think of who won it, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But they weren't as good as Todd Gurley. They would have beat
Georgia Tech, too. Well, yes. Georgia Tech will always live that they beat Georgia 2014. Todd Gurley's around. Georgia wins that and, probably runs away with it. But
part of what happened in 2014 and 2016, there's always repercussions from big wins and big losses. And 2014 brought Georgia Tech Kirby Smart for the near future, if not the extended future at Georgia. And I wonder if they would rather have lost that game. But Todd was an exceptional player, the likes of which I don't think I'll see very often. Here's a video up here of him talking about his experience after the 2014 Tennessee game, a game where he really went off and Georgia barely won the game. Thanks for listening.